The Middle East conflict has intensified in recent days, and if you're looking at first causes on the astrological level, you would point to the current position of the Sun and of Mars, because all throughout October, Mars and the Sun are in a square, although the most intense part of that would be from here, October 8th, 9th, into the 18th, 19th, when the exact square happens, but already we see intense battling going on. And so this is the explanation, to which we can add that two planetary stations, especially the Pluto station in the middle of October, but what happens with stations, yes, it's exact near the middle of October, but has an effect always days to even sometimes weeks before that. The Jupiter station on the 9th of October, though again you would say October 1st to about the 18th in terms of the intensity of a station, Jupiter being an expansion energy, and especially because in the case of Netanyahu being a Libra, he's getting a trine from Jupiter, and so therefore he's feeling expansive and ambitious, and he wants to intensify the war in order to give Israel more power. Now, the thing is, if you're looking for when this might stop, abate, improve in some way, I'm afraid it's going to be a while, because even if we say once this period here passes, perhaps things will improve. Certainly this is the worst of it in here, October of 24. But then when we look at the chart for Israel and the chart for Netanyahu to get more information, in the case of Israel, we see that Uranus on their sun has correlated with the tremendous instability that this period has generated, and began in the fall of 2023, and Uranus then, if we look at the ephemeris, Uranus was in those degrees on the Israeli sun. Over here we see Pluto in late Capricorn, where it is now. You can see that Pluto in late Capricorn is right at the bottom of the chart, squaring the Israeli ascendant. 4:32 p.m., the time for this chart, is when the State of Israel was announced, literally. So this chart is the accepted Class A chart for Israel. And so right now, Uranus is not on the sun degrees. It's a little bit forward, but the basic astrology rule that once a planet contacts another planet in transit, which it did in the fall of 23, it is effectively on that planet until it completely finishes the transit. For that, we check in here and we see that Uranus was there in the fall of 23, then in the spring into early summer of 24, and then again, you see it in here early next year, especially in the February period when there's a station, after which it gets beyond those degrees. So that is one possibility where we could see significant change the spring of 2025, or a little before, a little after. The other reason that is also likely to be the case is that right now, I did say here Mars is in Cancer, but it's going to go into Leo in early November, and then it'll go retrograde and come back into Leo degrees and Cancer degrees, then go forward, and finally you can see it here that it goes direct in Cancer in the spring of 2025. And so that is another indicator that we're probably looking at least that for significant change. Moreover, you can see that right now Pluto is where it was, and this is a really interesting correlation because the worst of it, you would argue, was back in here when the war began, and then now we're in a particularly tricky period with Pluto in those degrees, but it does get out and it will go into Aquarius permanently, which again would probably help this to improve. Now in the meantime, if you think longer term, yes, there's a possibility in here that things get better, but this period here from the spring of 25 all the way to the spring of 26, the problem with that is that Uranus, you see in the Israeli chart, will leave the sun, but then it moves forward and will square their Mars. And this could quite easily continue the conflict. Not to mention that the Pluto, though it leaves Capricorn, as it turns out, their MCIC is just in the beginning of Leo Aquarius. So looking in here, the Pluto doesn't clear those degrees until at least down here in the spring of 26. Then it gets beyond it. So does the Uranus, because by then Uranus will enter Gemini. And so that would probably be a better period of time in terms of an expectation when things would truly settle down in Israel. In the meantime, as far as Netanyahu is concerned, he's still riding pretty high. The most critical symbol is the Jupiter, because this is Israel, here's Netanyahu. Jupiter in Gemini does trine all his Libra planets, and is yet to trine his sun right now. It's trining his moon, hence the expansion effect, wanting the country to have more power and so on. He's feeling that way. However, in the longer term, my guess is that this guy is going to go down, because once Jupiter gets out of Gemini, that particular support will end. And Pluto right now is squaring, and this could turn out to be, in the short term, possibly some kind of gain, but in the longer term is likelier to hurt it, because if you look further ahead, is the Pluto will go into Aquarius, but much more ominous is that Saturn and Neptune together, but especially Saturn, will enter Aries a little bit in 2025 and then fully in 2026. And in the meantime, you can add to that the Uranus cycle, long before that, you see the Mars here at 26 Leo, long before that, Uranus is going to be squaring. It is now, but it's going to square again in here in the spring of 25. So that definitely represents a threat. But it is possible that this man may survive all the way into 2026. But I think one way or the other, he's going to eventually have to abdicate his post, because Saturn and Neptune going into Aries is in my opinion, too difficult to survive with a chart that has so much Libra energy. This, by the way, is something that separately, even though it's a totally different topic, is also Vladimir Putin's problem, because he too has many, many planets in Libra. And so the last planet that you want on the other side of that is Saturn, Neptune to some extent, but Saturn for sure, especially when you have accountability vulnerabilities, which certainly Netanyahu has, on account of, by all accounts, being in power. In a lot of ways, he wants to be in power, because otherwise he's facing prison time. In the case of Putin, it's a different story, but this just goes to say that the Saturn-Neptune cycle is super important. Problem is that that cycle is still a ways away, because we will see the first Saturn-Neptune conjunction next year, mid-year, but then they both retrograde back into Pisces. They do not fully connect with the sign of Aries, final conjunction, until 2026. You see in here how Saturn is right there in 25. It enters Aries briefly, and so does Neptune 2025, but it's only in 26 finally, when February there is Neptune and March of 26 is Saturn. And these big planet conjunctions tend to have major effects on world conditions, various countries, people's charts, etc. In fact, most notably, it is well known from the work of my namesake Andre Barbeau that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has had tremendous effect on the fortunes of Russia because of the last three. The 1917 Russian Revolution was a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. 1952, the death of Lenin. And in the late 80s, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction signified the collapse of the Soviet Union at the time. And this one is going to be another major one as well. My suspicion is not very good for Russia or for Putin. In fact, likely to be very bad in terms of his current expectations. But back to the topic at hand, Israel. At the moment, Israel, you could say, is definitely in one of its most bottom moments, and that's delineated by Pluto in the chart, transiting so low in the chart. This is the area of the nadir and the Inum Coli, which is as low as it can go, and so it's typically a low moment, a bad moment. And notice that at the birth of the country, it's a very elevated planet, but at the moment, it's not doing very well at all, and so hence Israel is in quite a struggle during these times.